My brothers and sisters, when I first read that gospel several weeks ago, I realized how important it is for a reunion mass. I'll explain why that thought came to me. The people to whom Jesus was speaking, those to whom he addressed this parable, were far less sophisticated and far less educated than we are. And they were mercifully dependent upon the elements of nature and had a little knowledge of meteorology or what caused the weather, the sun, the rain. So that's why we heard in the gospel, the farmer who sowed the seeds knew not what was happening, but he was mystified by it, fascinated. Year after year, the same thing happened. Sometimes the crops were abundant, sometimes not. He was at the mercy of the elements, as we know many farmers are even today. We know much more about agricultural science today than he did, but still there is a mystery of what causes a seed to flourish and produce a crop. That phrase stayed with me these last several weeks. We are in the presence of mystery when we reflect on the seed that began life for each one of us in the womb of our mothers. And it is in God's divine providence that God invited us, weak and frail human creatures, to cooperate with him in creation. I'm not married as many as you are, but I can only imagine the wonder and the fascination when one of your children was born. To look into the face of that helpless infant and to realize that Almighty God had allowed you to join God in creating that child. It is an incredible miracle, isn't it? Now let me speak about a few miracles that I engaged in or wondered about and enjoyed with the class of 1974. You began your career at Fairfield Prep in September 1970. And whether you realized it at the time or not, it was a year of transformation in Fairfield College Preparatory School. And you men, you were freshmen then, you were given a magnificent gift because your parents realized the value and the hope the Jesuit high school education might bestow upon you. And with a good bit of sacrifice, they chose, and maybe you'd made the choice as well, to come to prep. The 4 years you spent on this campus in high school were transformational. You grew in ways that you had never imagined or could fully comprehend when you entered the school in September 1970. Thank God that educational process has continued to bear fruit in your lives since you left us 50 years ago this month. College, business world, occupations, marriage, family life. Maybe some of you are, I don't know, maybe some of you are grandfathers already. But the seeds that were planted in your heart and in your head were placed there by Almighty God. God knew when he created you the possibilities that existed in your human creation. And they were nurtured by your parents at home, even before you knew about Fairfield Prep. That your parents had you baptized. I don't know whether you received a Catholic education in grammar school or not, but the faith that was part of that baptismal rite was nurtured by your parents. Sustained by God's grace, and your parents' blood, sweat, and tears, as well as their prayers. That process continued during the 4 years you were with us on this campus. Your class was unique in one very, very important way. September 1970 marked the beginning of a new era in prep because we had a woman teacher on the faculty. And all of you were in Betty Katchmar's art class freshman year, right? She started at prep when you did. She was a remarkable woman, a remarkable educator, a mother, and she loved you as she loved her own children. And she nurtured you during the 4 years that you were here. You were her gentle boys, right? I recall hearing her say that time and time again as she watched you grow. No other class up till that time had had one teacher with them for the entire freshman year. She taught all of you. No other teacher at prep can make that statement about you during your 4 years. And she taught you far more than art, didn't she? She taught you about life. She taught you about love of God. And I know she taught you about St. Ignatius of Loyola. Far better, perhaps, than some of the Jesuits on the faculty could have done it. Betty Kay, having a woman on the faculty transformed the school. Betty was a trailblazer, and there are dozens of women on the faculty now who owe it to her to make the start, to open the door, and to help you young men realize the influence a woman teacher could have on your lives. Now, I don't want to idealize Betty any more than necessary, but I can also tell you that there were Jesuits on the faculty who resisted that movement to open up art because it did so at the expense of Latin and Greek, the classical hallmark of Jesuit education. Well, Jesuit education has to change with the times, to hold on to the values which are important and significant and unchangeable, but also to realize that there are other ways of reaching the same goal by the same means, if not by the same exact subject matter. Fairfield Prep has flourished in the last 54 years. You would recognize it if you came back and walked the corridors someday when school is in session. Yes, boys are still boys, and freshmen are still freshmen, but there's a transformation that takes place during the 4 years so that when a senior leaves, he's no longer a boy, he's a young man, ready to face the future full of confidence and hope and the security of knowing who he is, knowing that he's loved by God and been given gifts that are to be used in the service of God and God's holy people in whatever his vocational choice is in life. I'm sure those of you who are parents recognize what I'm talking about. You have seen your children grown from babies and infants, toddlers, teenagers, to adulthood. It's a magnificent process, but it's also one fraught with a lot of danger as well, and a lot of tears and sweat and hope on the part of the parents who nurture their children. On behalf of the Jesuits and the other faculty members who welcomed you young men in the class of 1974, I want to thank your parents who are now gone to their eternal reward for making the choice to send you to prep. Your lives are different because of your 4-year experience with us, aren't they? And the parable of the mustard seed, which is the second part of the gospel, picks that up very beautifully. The yield that you have produced by the way you have lived your lives as men of faith, conviction, vision, determination, and hope. You have found success, and I trust you have found happiness and fulfillment in the last 50 years. I've been watching from a distance, and it is a joy and a privilege to be here with you this evening to share the recognition of what your golden diploma symbolizes. You were important to me for another reason. I'll make it personal for just a moment. It was during your senior year that I discerned that Jesus was calling me to the side of Jesus. March 25th, 1974, in the old Loyola Chapel. The responsorial psalm at Mass that day was during Lent. It was my habit to attend Mass during Lent. The responsorial psalm response was, "Here I am, Lord, I come to do your will." I thought, oh my God. It was like I was hit by the thunderbolt. And I knew that I couldn't resist. I taught at Prep for another year and finally entered the society in 1975, a year after you left Prep. But it's not about me today, it's about you. But you had an impact on my vocation, I'm sure of it. And all the students I taught between 1966 and 75, they pulled something out of me, helped me to realize gifts that I didn't realize I had. And with God's grace, showed me what I could be and the ways in which I could serve the Lord. Well, you've gone through the same process, but made a different vocational choice, which is wonderful, excellent, appropriate. So I share this evening with you with great joy and great gratitude. I hope and I pray with God's grace that you will continue to grow in your desire and love of God and of your family and of your community. The world needs your witness. God knows that the troubled times in which we live. Thank you for all that you have done with your Jesuit education that was given to you at Fairfield Prep. Thank you for what you've done during the last 50 years, and please continue to do it day in and day out, even if nobody notices, but somebody will. That's the God who created you and loves you beyond imagination, whether you realize that or not. Explicitly, you should know it implicitly. You are men of Prep. You're graduates of Fairfield Prep, and that's an honor that many young men don't get a chance to experience. In the last 50 years, you have become Betty Kachmar's not gentle boys, but gentle men, gentle husbands, gentle fathers. There's a softness in that, isn't there, that Betty gave you, showed you, but you appropriated it for yourselves. And it's a beautiful, beautiful way to live in this world. Please continue to do so. Please continue to witness to the value of Jesuit education as it was given to you at Prep. It's priceless. Just as the yield of the crop in the parable of this evening's gospel. And we know not where it came from. It's something you didn't really earn. It was a gift. God gave it to you through your parents and through this community of teachers, Jesuits, non-Jesuits, men and women. committed to a vision of Catholic Jesuit education that you have appropriated and lived with dignity and joy and sometimes struggle. We may live, we may die, but we never say, what is it? Let's go, Fairfield. Fairfield, let's go. Thank you.